Welcome to the EX Factor, where we discuss the practical application of building an employee experience as your competitive advantage. I'm Mark Lewis, CEO of Crewmojo, a platform for automating and managing a more personalised and meaningful employee experience. Hi, so today we're welcoming Ash and Mel from Starlight Children's Foundation, and we're going to take a bit of a deep dive into the way they manage or handle or bring a performance experience to life in their organisation. I'll ask perhaps Ashley if you could give you a bit of an intro about yourself, and then we'll go on to you, Mel.
Sure. Thank you, Mark. And we're so excited to be here today. My name's Ashley. I'm the National Talent Manager at Starlight. I have been at Starlight for nearly 8 years. And in my role, it's really a broad generalist HR role. So looking after both developing and operationalizing the P&C strategy.
Thanks, Ash, and thanks, Mark. It's great to be here, as Ash said. So, I also work in the people and culture team. I'm Starlight's positive psychology advisor. So, I look after all things in regards to our mental health and wellbeing strategy and our learning and development strategy. So, we place, really great importance on proactive, holistic, evidence-based approaches to team members' mental health and wellbeing and their learning and growth, as we know that really has a significant impact on their performance and overall employment experience, which we'll be touching on today as well.
That's exciting. I can't wait to dive into a bit more about the positive psychology approach that you bring. I know that it's something that's very much embedded, and we'll definitely ask a few more questions on that shortly. Perhaps to kick us off, maybe tell us a little bit about how, and even if you call it performance, how do you term performance, and how does that connect to the bigger picture at Starlight? How does it feed in and support the Starlight strategy?
Sure. So, Mark, it all starts with our mission. So, Starlight's mission is to brighten the lives of seriously ill children and young people because happiness matters. And the purpose of performance at Starlight is really to support all of our team members in being able to achieve high performance in their roles, which then obviously directly contributes to Starlight achieving our mission.
When you designed this approach to performance, maybe tell us about some of the key pillars that guided that approach. How did you land on this particular philosophy?
Yeah, I can jump in with that one. Thanks, Mark. And Ash just briefly touched on it just then as well. But when she mentioned that at Starlight, we place such great focus and emphasis on performing as individuals, as teams, and as an organisation. So those three areas really are our key pillars: individual, team, and organisation. So at the individual level, we focus on performance in terms of, or we consider what is a total view of performance at the individual level. And that really is captured by everyone's role responsibilities that they have. So everything we're responsible for in our role description, as well as anything we're responsible for delivering on our team business plans. And also the goals that we create for ourselves to focus on creating our best possible impact. And those goals that we create for ourselves are created and tracked and measured in Crewmojo. So they're our Crewmojo goals. And then team performance, what that looks like is each team achieving their annual business plans, and then performance at that organisational level is really achieving on our organisation-wide strategy and ultimately delivering on our mission, which Ash touched on before. So they're our three key pillars, but then there's some things that really support that as well. We know that what really drives performance are team members continuing to grow and evolve in their roles and feel supported and have high levels of wellbeing. So growth and wellbeing are really key principles that come into it too. We can't be high performers and delivering on our mission if we're not continuing to grow and being at our best.
And I know, because I've seen some of the documents that have come out from Starlight around the performance process, that you very much take a user-centered approach to these processes that you bring to life. So maybe tell us a little bit about the way that you want team members to feel when they experience this approach to performance.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, you're absolutely right. We really think very deeply about our team members' experience and how we want them to feel through the process. So maybe I'll first start with the principles that kind of guided the performance experience and then lead into how we want people to feel, because they are related. So as Mel mentioned, we really are looking for high performance and achievement at all levels, so individual, team, and org. And we want our team members to take personal responsibility for their performance with the support of their people manager as their coach, where their goals are also individually meaningful for them, and they're motivated to achieve those goals, and their people managers, as I said, are there as their coach, really supporting them across their goals, their performance, their growth, and their well-being with a real focus on strengths. We want performance to be in the flow of work. So it's an ongoing process. It's not a once-off kind of once-a-year check-in. And to lead into how we want people to feel based off those principles, we want them to feel that it's a really meaningful process, that what they are working on and their performance is aligned to their role and the organizational impact. We want the experience to really support them in achieving in their roles, supporting their growth and their well-being, and ultimately to be their best selves, because we know that if our team members are at their best, then Starlight's at its best. And ultimately, we also want them to feel really valued and recognised for their achievements.
So I've noticed there's a really big theme, and as we touched on at the beginning, is very much on this positive approach to performance. And I'm really, really curious, what would you say to other people who say, well, actually, you need to have more constructive feedback in the process? I'm really curious to hear your views on that and how that would, or how it does or wouldn't manifest well in Starlight.
Yes. So, Mark, as you mentioned, we do have a really positive focus on performance at Starlight, and we would see that as a real benefit to our overall process, and it actually is something that enables constructive feedback rather than hinders it. So because we have a focus on team members being at their best, we focus on them working to their strengths. They have their people manager as a coach, and they have great relationships with their people managers. We are really intentional about team size at Starlight and making sure that team members have the right support in their people manager. So when you've got those great relationships, then you can have really honest conversations, and you can provide, really clear, constructive feedback to your team so that they can ultimately perform at a high level. So we would say it is an enabler of performance, our positive culture.
That's fantastic. And even, and I'll get to you in a moment, Mel. I know you've probably got something to say on that as well. But I even just on there, the terminology of how you use the word people coaches instead of managers. And I'm curious, when you say that you have a specific number or a limited number of direct reports into a people coach, tell us what sort of numbers are you looking at there?
Yes, so we do call them people managers, but we say that the core capability of their role is as a coach, and that's the core skill set of the people manager role. We don't per se have parameters around the number of people in teams, but what we do say is that each team needs to be with a minimum of 2 people. So for a people manager to have at least 2 direct reports, because then you get that real sense of team when it's not just one-to-one. And then within our hub-based teams, so our office-based teams, they're typically probably teams of between 5 to 8 team members reporting to any one manager. Our program managers, so our managers that support the Captain Starlight and Livewire facilitators that work in hospital with children, they are a little larger, but they have both part-time and casual team members as well. So, but we're really mindful of when we're introducing new roles, new people managers, that we're looking at their team size as well.
One more question before I go back to Mel on that, because you've really piqued my curiosity there. You've mentioned obviously that you have like part-timers and volunteers as well in the organisation. How does this process work to engage them? Because I know that for a lot of not-for-profits, it can be really challenging to engage performance with part-time or volunteers in an organisation.
We typically have part-timers as kind of 3+ days. So really within that, we obviously make sure that it's right-sized for them in terms of the goals that they have and what they're assigned on the business plan to achieve, so that we're really thoughtful about their capacity and what they can achieve within the time that they're at work. And because their goals are meaningful and they directly relate to what they need to achieve within their role in the business plan, we don't really see a disconnect between part-time and full-time team members' engagement with this process.
I love the way that you've adjusted the sort of requirements there from a part-time versus a full-time, so that you're conscious of, again, creating an experience that's sensible relative to the time that they can put into it, rather than having this unrealistic expectation of how much time they can put into performance. As much as I love this topic, I know that it's a slice of everybody's day.
Yes, and Mark, I think that has just reminded me of another principle. Within the performance goals that we ask our team members to set, it's not an additional thing that they need to do. It's something that sits within their role responsibilities or sits within their business plan priorities already. So it isn't an add-on. It's not something extra that we're asking them to achieve. It really is directly related to what they need to achieve in their role.
That's awesome. Mel, did you want to talk a little bit from your angle?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And Ash, that's such a good point that you touched on, and a really important message that we continually reiterate to the team, that the goals that we create in Crewmojo, exactly as you said, Ash, they're not designed to be something additional you're meant to be responsible for achieving in your role. Instead, it's looking at what are you already responsible for and having you think about, where do I really want to focus on creating my best impact over the next 3 or 6 months, however long you would like to set that goal for, and work closely with my manager in doing that. So we say, the language we use is, look at your existing responsibilities and have a think about, where would you like to shine a spotlight on your role, and really dive deep in that. So thanks for raising that, Ash. I think that's a really good point. And just back to your point, Mark, about positivity, and I'm really glad that you raised that, and Ash, your response was great in that it enables us to have those really clear, honest, and constructive conversations. And it is a bit of a myth that within the field of positive psychology, that it's about being positive all of the time, or not being able to have those tough conversations, or being happy all the time. And I always love to bust that myth any chance that I get, because that sort of mindset is actually toxic positivity, which is exactly what we are, or the complete opposite to what we focus on at Starlight. So although we invest so much in supporting team members in being at their best, having a positive workplace culture, being a great place to work, in order to be high performers, grow and stretch in our roles, we need to be challenged. We need to be getting constructive feedback. That's absolutely essential. Once again, to high performance and ongoing growth. And as Ash also touched on, we can do that because we have such great relationships and we have a great tool to support us in doing that. So that's what I would add to that.
That's very helpful and insightful for me as well. Thank you. I also noticed, as both of you are talking, you almost have these, it's like mini labels for things, which is like your own naming conventions, like shining a spotlight on. And tell me how much that language plays a part of the program. Yeah.
It's such a good point, Mark, and I think probably Mel and I have worked together for such a long time. We are just in sync with that without even maybe meaning to be on some things, but on other things, you're absolutely right. We are really intentional about the language that we use, and we really like to weave in our Starlight brand to make it really authentic and tangible for the team. We do think carefully about what are the naming conventions for different aspects of the performance experience. And for example, instead of performance reviews, we talk about reflections. And we've put a lot of thought into that in terms of, well, what's the purpose of that? How do we want people to be feeling, and what do we want them to be doing at that step of the process? And it is really reflecting with their manager on their performance and their goals and their growth, not so much being reviewed. That feels like something that's happening to you, whereas reflections are something that is a conversation between both the team member and the people manager. So there's kind of dual responsibility, and it's led by the team member.
I love it. It really makes it your own process and feels very much embedded. And I think that's a nice segue into the actual framework that you use. Maybe if you can describe the key elements, like give us a picture of the overall performance experience to describe how that looks.
The positive experience, absolutely strive to be, and mirroring that in terms of our culture, and ensuring the team have an equally positive experience. So yeah, using our language and ensuring that whenever we're adopting external tools, we do place great focus on, is this something that we can make tweaks to, or really align to our culture? So that was a key consideration actually in selecting Crewmojo, which we might get to at some point. But yes, back to your question, Mark, about the what are the key elements of the performance framework. So, which Ash has also touched on, but so it all starts with, we know that performance, we're all here to perform in our roles and deliver in our roles and contribute and deliver to our mission. So that's really powered by goals and growth. So what that means is all team members, so full-time and part-time, in terms of their goals in Crewmojo, are required to have a minimum of one performance goal at any point in time and one learning and development goal at any point in time. So we touched on this before, but these are goals that are there to help you in creating your best possible impact with what you're already responsible for in your role. So what am I responsible for? Where do I want to shine that spotlight and really dive into? And then in terms of my learning and development, what am I responsible for achieving, and considering what's an area of knowledge I would like to develop to support me in achieving this area, or what's a skill I would like to develop in, or is there an area of strength I would like to focus in developing in. And we don't have a strict requirement at all in terms of the time frame of each goal, as we know that people are working on different projects that go for different lengths of time. And when we initially introduced our approach, we did actually have certain timeframes that were required, but we always value and seek feedback from the team, and we found that it wasn't really working for them. Some team members, or a lot of team members, were like, I would love the flexibility to create a time frame that works best for the nature of the goal that I've created for myself. So we very quickly adapted and listened to that. So that's why now the time in a way that best suits the nature of the goal. So some people might have a goal for 3 months, others might have for 6 months. Doesn't matter what the length of goal is. It's just important that everyone has a really meaningful, smart, quality smart goal in terms of performance and learning and development, and they work really closely with their people manager to pursue that, to make their progress and to celebrate their achievements along the way. So that's also an essential part of the framework, is engaging in ongoing coaching with your manager. And ideally, we strive for that all team members and their people managers check in on the progress of their goals at least monthly. We know that, some team members work part-times and that might not work, but that's the rough sort of coaching check-in that we aim for. And then in addition to that, Ash touched on reflection. So we really value taking time out throughout the year to properly pause and stop and reflect on where have I created my best impact? What have I achieved? How am I going with the progress of my learning and development goal? So we actually do that 3 times a year. So in January, May, and September. So January is an opportunity to reflect on the whole previous year in terms of your performance and growth. May is an opportunity to specifically reflect on your learning and development and your growth. So, what goal did you create for yourself? How are you going with that? What are your next steps? And we very strategically selected May because we feel that mid year, that's a little bit too far into the year. And we want people to be pausing a little bit sooner than that and thinking about, yeah, what is it that I said I'd like to focus on growing and developing in, and how am I going with that? And then in September, we focus on reflecting on our performance and positive impact. Once again, in a formal way, team members and their managers are doing this throughout the year regularly, but we know that there is great value in stopping, doing a formal reflection, writing your written reflections, and then having a dedicated reflection conversation with your manager. So, yeah, we do that 3 times a year, which we know is quite unique from sort of other processes. And we very much value recognition and celebrating achievements throughout the year as well. So, we have a very strong culture of recognition at Starlight, which we're very proud of.
How did you land on 3 times a year? Like it is, there's no right or wrong. I'm just curious how you landed on 3 times a year.
Yeah, that's a great question, and exactly, yeah, that there is no right or wrong, but we were feeling that 2 times a year wasn't quite enough, and mid-year. So previously it was mid-year and end of year, and mid-year was felt like too much of the year had sort of gotten away, and then reflecting at the end of the year, people are at capacity. They're trying to wrap things up, achieve the remainder of the deliverables on the business plan. So we thought, oh, these timings aren't quite working for everyone across the business. Also, mid-year we have a lot of big fundraising events during that time, so being required to stop at that point in time and formally reflect was creating perhaps a bit of stress for some team members.
And I think just to add to that, Mel, with the September reflection, you touched on it in when typically or traditionally organisations might reflect or have the annual review process kind of at the end of the year. As you mentioned, there's a lot going on for team members there. They're trying to wrap up their goals. They're trying to wrap up the year. But it's also too late if you're behind on any of your milestones or goals to kind of catch it and be able to achieve it. So by doing it in September, it really gives the team member and people manager an opportunity to check in, see, where they're at with their progress and what support or what additional work might need to get done before the end of the year to make sure that we're really achieving what we need to achieve for our annual business plans.
That's awesome. I'm also hearing through all of this a thread of co-creation with employees and team members, so that it's not one and done. You're putting stuff into the organization, then you're listening to the feedback, and then you're iterating your processes based on that feedback. And it sounds like that's quite an embedded way of working there.
Absolutely. And we really pride ourselves on that across all of our people practices, not just the performance experience, but really listening to the team, gaining their feedback, and looking at how we can adopt their feedback.
Tell me more about maybe what goes on in each of those elements. Is there maybe walk me through a reflection, an example of exactly what a reflection would look like there?
Good question. They're all slightly different. So as Mel said, with January, it's really the opportunity to look back on the year that was. So we typically have 4 questions that team members would reflect on. And then there's typically also a question that has them looking forward as well into the year that is coming up. And that's typically, as we said, there isn't set time frames on goals, but typically that's where most of our team members would start goal setting because it aligns with the annual business planning cycle. So they'd be setting their goals as part of that as well, meeting with their managers, talking through the goal that they've set, why it's personally meaningful to them, how it aligns with the business plan, their role responsibilities, and their manager is really there as their coach to help them craft that goal. So what it looks like is that the team member and our people manager write their reflections independently. And then at the end of the cycle or the reflection period, we release the reflections in a report that then both team member and people manager are able to access, review, and we encourage them to really deeply consider the reflections that each of them have put in. And then we encourage them to meet and have a conversation around that. So with May, that's really the same process as well. However, one slight difference is that it's really encouraged, but it's really led by the team member in terms of if they want to seek their people manager's written feedback. Whereas in January, it's a requirement for people managers and team members to do that. And that's the same for September as well. Mel, any other points that you'd touch on within reflections?
I might just add to that, Ash, in terms of why I guess it's optional, if that's the right word, for people managers to provide.
Encouraged, yeah.
Yeah, encouraged, exactly, to provide written feedback in May. And that's because our May reflection, the focus of that is learning and growth. And we know that each of us as team members are responsible for driving our ongoing learning and growth with the wonderful support of our people manager, but it's up to us to lead. So therefore we say, yeah, you're in the driver's seat when it comes to your May reflection, just like you are with your learning and development. And all team members are required to complete their written reflections. And then if they would like formal written feedback on their learning and growth from their people manager, then they go through, follow some simple steps to seek that written feedback via Crewmojo. Regardless of whether the people manager is asked to provide written feedback or not, the people manager and team member will still engage in a meaningful reflection conversation after that written reflection period. So the people manager is still responsible for how you're going with your goal and checking in and what support do you need, what next step will you take. But yeah, that written feedback part, that's up to the team member to decide whether they want that from their people manager.
And I know that you have a very strong in the moment feedback culture as well. You constantly have that in the moment feedback. Tell us a little bit about that and how and if does that feed into those other reflection processes?
We place great focus on what contributes to high levels of team member engagement, and key principles that we focus on are research conducted by the Gallup consultancy firm, and they've produced research on the 12 elements of great managing. And one of those is around the importance of receiving regular, meaningful feedback on a weekly basis from your manager around, your performance and your positive impact and your achievements. So that is something that we are very much focused on at Starlight. All people managers, when they join Starlight, engage in formal people management training that we run in-house that is, however, based on all external evidence-based best practice research. So I'm glad you touched on that. We do place a great focus on feedback in the flow of work. And as you've probably seen from our data as well, Mark, it's not just feedback from your people manager, it's your peers, anyone that you are working with. And so all team members across Starlight send feedback to one another via the feedback functionality in Crewmojo, which is a great functionality that supports in giving feedback in the flow of work. We have such a high usage of that, and we're so thrilled once again that it's not just people managers to team members. Team members are giving it to one another. They're giving feedback to their manager. So that's something that we're really proud of.
The only thing that I would add is, I think to come back to Crewmojo and the feedback functionality in Crewmojo, as Mel said, feedback is really part of our culture at Starlight, and it is in the flow of work. So there's lots of feedback that's given, in person, on the job, on a day-to-day basis. What we really love about Crewmojo is it allows team members to really stop and people managers to really stop and think about considered feedback or recognition that they would like to provide another team member. We love that you can link the feedback that you're giving to elements of our Shine value, which I know the team really love as well, because it's a really nice way to recognize not just someone's performance or contribution, which is really important, but also how they performed or how they contributed. So it's not just the what that they did, but how they did it and how that contributed to our culture as well. So that's one of the elements of the Crewmojo feedback that we really love.
So I know a lot of organizations that are trying to get a feedback culture going. You guys have nailed it. As you say, we see the data. What advice would you have for an organization that's perhaps just getting started on trying to get that feedback flowing?
Great question. I personally think it all starts with the relationships. We would say that relationships are a core competency at Starlight. And without trusted relationships, you kind of don't have a key to play, if that makes sense. So if you don't have those trusted relationships, trying to provide someone with meaningful feedback, whether it be recognition or whether it be constructive feedback, where there's not that trust and rapport established, it's a really difficult task. So I think firstly, establishing those relationships across the organization from a people manager and team member perspective and across the org is essential. And I think the other thing that we spend a lot of time on is supporting our people managers and our team members to give really meaningful feedback. So there's a lot of ways to give bad feedback. So we really support them with, tools and frameworks to give feedback that's going to be meaningful, to support them in having those feedback conversations, so that they can do that successfully and they can achieve the outcomes that they're trying to achieve in delivering the feedback. Mel, what would you add?
Yeah, thanks, Ash. Your points are great, but I would also add in terms of, for other organizations is considering or connecting to the clear why of feedback and creating a strong feedback culture. Like, I know that the why for Starlight is that ongoing meaningful feedback really powers and bolsters team members' performance, their growth, and their well-being. It significantly impacts each of those three areas. And I think people, when they hear the word feedback, have a sort of negativity bias in terms of that they associate it with negative feedback, for example. But we say that all feedback at Starlight, whether it's constructive, whether it's positive, the intention is always to support you in shining as a Starlight team member, and once again to support your ongoing performance, your growth, and your well-being. You can't have high levels of well-being in your role if you're not getting ongoing feedback. And once again, we can't be high performers, and our growth will be not as strongly supported if we're not getting meaningful feedback. So having a clear why for it and everyone understanding the intention of feedback, I would say, is critical as well.
So perhaps tell us a little bit about when you rewind back to the sort of implementation of the process, what has worked well in bringing the performance process live across the organization?
Really clear intention principles document for us as the implementation team. And that really worked in our favor, that every step we took, we were regularly revisiting that document and are we on track with our original intentions, which of course were all about supporting the team and being their best and shining and high performers and implementing something that was authentic to the organization. So I think that really helped in setting us up for success, having a clear vision for what we wanted this to mean and feel like as a Starlight team member. So that would be the first thing that I would share. Followed by, we really consulted and brought team members along the journey with our implementation.
I think it clearly showed. I remember when we did go live, the stats in terms of the number of goals that got entered in your first days were quite staggering. So I think that preparedness going into the live and also bringing people onto the journey has something that clearly paid dividends there.
On Go Live date, the first action for all of us as Starlight team members was going in and entering in our new goals. So there was quite a lot of energy around that. And yeah, that was very much reflected in our data. We had a significant number of goals
It was
created
phenomenal
within the first week.
What I think there's a real gold nugget there as well, and that is giving people something rather than just opening up and saying here's a platform to get into. What you've really achieved there is giving people a very focused first task or activity to do within the platform and prepared before it. And I think that really catapulted you into a position of a flying start. It was a tremendous stats. I don't think we've seen anything like it before.
And yeah, we were really confident with the tool and with our approach, and so we knew that getting people into Crewmojo for the first time on launch day, so that they could see the tool and they could see the benefits on that very first day, was really going to support the adoption of it. So that was why we really had that intentional, clear task for what we wanted them to do on the first day.
I think that, again, that's really, really sound advice. And I think because you started with that document that you described at the beginning about your initial intentions about you want out of any tool, to be able to go back to that and keep that as your guiding principles for the initial rollout, you're able to then make sure you're not getting distracted by some of these other nice, bright, shiny objects, but choose at a later date when it makes sense to roll them out when people are ready for the next piece. How do you bring accountability to the process?
Great question. And it's one of our key focus areas at the moment, leading expectations and accountability for our people managers to really be able to do that within their teams. I think within how we use Crewmojo to support that is in it starting with goals. So having real clarity in terms of where our team members are shining a spotlight on their performance, where they're focusing, and setting their own timeframes, setting their milestones, and leading the conversations. It then allows their people manager to really hold really clear expectations to what the team members said they were going to achieve. And the accountability piece, we're really supporting our people managers in being able to have those conversations where if something isn't on track or something isn't being achieved, either to the level that it needs to be or in the time frame that it needs to be, they're able to really have meaningful conversations about why that's important, and really linking that back to how their performance and how their achievement supports Starlight's overall achievement. So, we want team members to be accountable in their roles, but for them to be motivated to do that, it's really important that they have that understanding as to why what they're working on matters.
Tell me about some metrics that you use in the HR team or people and talent team to track the effectiveness or how well the process is going. How do you make measurements in this area?
Absolutely. So we do measure the goals that our team members have. So as Mel mentioned at the beginning, we want all of our team members to have a performance goal, a learning and development goal. And so we track that all team members do have those goals in. And not only that they're in, but they're current, that their time frame is correct, and that they're SMART goals as well. So we really provide the data to our national managers and our people managers around the number of goals. And then we provide frameworks and tools for them to be able to go in and review their goals, make sure that their team members' goal is smart, if there's any tweaking or smartening up that needs to happen of that goal. So there's a real focus on goal quality that's supported by the metrics we're able to provide our team. And then we also do review our metrics on reflections. So, and we're really pleased to share that over the last few reflection processes, we've had 100% of our team members provided with written reflections and conversations with their team members. That is something that we are so proud of. And I think that really demonstrates the commitment of our team members and our people managers to performance. So we obviously do provide metrics again to people managers and national managers on reflection completion and supporting them with how people are going over that review process. It really is self-led, so we try and not provide, constant reminders in terms of there's 2 days left, there's 3 days left. Like the tool obviously provides reminders and we can see the progress that team members are making as they're making it throughout that cycle period. With the feedback functionality, we also are able to look at the metrics. We don't set metrics per se into how many pieces of feedback we want to receive, or there's no KPIs for team members to send X number of feedback. But we do keep an eye on that utilization just so we can see that feedback is still ongoing and it's still in the flow of work and team members are still using the tool. And we're really excited, Mark, about some of the new reporting and insights that Crewmojo have recently released. So that's probably next on our radar in terms of getting our people managers to do some of the work themselves in terms of being able to have that data at their fingertips and not needing to kind of wait for us to send that data out to them. So, yeah, we're really excited to jump into that.
That's awesome. You should be very proud of 100% completion rates. I know a lot of organizations will see that as literally a nirvana state. Like it's really an amazing achievement to be able to kick. I think we've probably talked a little bit at accountability. Is there any specifics on accountability for people managers?
Yeah, all people managers have key KPIs that they're responsible for achieving, related to ongoing coaching, and that team members are provided with ongoing feedback. Team members feel valued and those sorts of things. So is that so many of the functionalities in there, we can go into the data and reporting behind that to cross-check against our people metrics. How often are people managers meeting with their team members and what's the quality of their conversations? We can gauge a feel for that through the one-on-one activities, for example. As Ash mentioned, we can also gain that from the volume of feedback and the frequency of feedback that's being sent across the organisation. So, we have our bigger organisational metrics, and then it's great to be able to go into the tool and grab data that aligns back to that.
So it sounds like the process is doing its job and it's working well. Where to from here? Is there a vision for future in where you would like to take the process?
Just to give one example, a great focus for us is people managers being great coaches. We know how important that is and the impact that has on a team member's employment experience. That's long been a focus of ours, but it will continue to be one. And we also know the really critical role that people managers have in supporting and ensuring a psychosocial safe employment experience for all team members, and psychosocial health and safety is a really big focus, I imagine, for most or ideally all organisations right now, as there's increasing regulatory reform in that area. But in terms of Crewmojo, the one-on-one feature is such a great tool for ensuring that every time you meet with your team member, you can have a simple check-in, but a meaningful check-in to ensure that they have real clarity. They've got the support they need this week. They're pursuing meaningful work, which all of those brief 3 examples are essential for having a psychosocial safe experience at work. So that's something that we're currently focused on right now in terms of where to from here is, how can we tweak and add additions to the one-on-one feature that, further supports a really healthy and safe employment experience for all team members.
I would really like to thank both of you, Ash and Mel, for joining us on the conversation here, and also being so open with what you've been prepared to share. It's an amazing brand, Starlight. It's amazing things that you achieve, and to be able to sort of lift the lid on some of the inner workings, I know is going to be something that's going to be fascinating for other people to hear and learn from. Again, thank you very much for joining us on here.
Thanks so much, Mark. It's great to be here. Thank you.